San Francisco, it's Rex Broadcasting Wrestling Observer with Dave Meltzer and Bryan Alvarez.
Are you ready? Are you ready?
Let's get it on!
How's it going, everybody? This is Dave Meltzer, and I'm going to be here with Bryan Alvarez for the next 2 hours talking about pro wrestling, and we have a nice new open there. We're coming from the studios of Sports Byline USA in San Francisco, and if you want to join in this show, you can call us at 1-866-OBSERVER. We only have the out-of-the-country line's the only one actually that's available right now. So when someone, after we're done with the call, you can click on and try to get on at that point. We're not going to have any guests today, just 2 hours of me and Bryan. We've got so many topics to get to. Let's see what's going on. We can talk about WWE Confidential, since that seems to be a major topic of conversation today. Both last week's show and this week's show. We can talk about last week's show as far as this show with Bret Hart, as a matter of fact. We can talk about the Tough Enough. I have a feeling a lot of people may want to talk about that. We're going to actually, Bryan and I will probably talk about that in just a little while. Or pretty much anything else you want to talk about in the current pro wrestling mixed martial arts scene as well. Bryan, how are you tonight?
I'm doing good.
Okay. I guess we might as well start on Tough Enough. What were your thoughts? You watched the final show. What were your thoughts on everything?
I think if there was a surprise by anything, it was the fact that Kenny didn't make it. And I know they only had to choose two people, and, you know, I don't disagree with any of the two choices. They chose Jackie and Linda, both the girls, and it was, I know they kind of made it clear going in that it was going to be just two people, not necessarily one guy and one girl. Ended up being both the girls, and a lot of people wondering why Jake did not get chosen. And I think that in all the videos that they did and the way they set the filming up in the edit, I think that when they had four guys left, they kind of had to make it appear like it was still competitive. And I think if you had even the worst Hulk Hogan match, there's a way to edit it, especially if you're Kevin Dunn, to make it look better than it is. And I think they did that a lot with Jake. So I think that if we would have actually seen all the training footage, it probably wouldn't have been a surprise that he was cut. But he was. And Kenny, I thought, had the best post.
Oh, boy, wasn't that interesting?
When he said, well,
it wasn't
I thought this was going to be about athletics or something like that. And I've learned my lesson.
And it wasn't.
Yes, he's learned his first lesson about pro wrestling.
Yes, he did.
After the competition was over. So
you know what's funny is the rule that, you know, it wasn't going to be one guy and one girl was because in the first season of Tough Enough, they wanted to choose two guys, and they were basically forced to pick, either Nitti or Taylor. So the idea was, when they did this, was that they were probably going to end up picking two guys. And as it turned out, they ended up picking two women.
Yep.
So it's kind of interesting. But anyway, we will get to phone calls in just a second. You can call us, as I said, at 1-866-OBSERVER when a line is free. And you're listening to the Wrestling Observer live on the Sports Byline USA radio network. Good.
We're back with Wrestling Observer Live. Give us a call anywhere in the U.S. toll-free at 1-866-OBSERVER. That's 1-866-627-3783. Once again, here's Dave Meltzer and Bryan Alvarez.
Okay, welcome back to the show. I'm Dave Meltzer, editor of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, with Bryan Alvarez of Figure 4 Weekly. And Bryan had one of his best issues in a long time. And I always enjoy him, but this week talking about steroids, the EMLL, the invasion. They're just a very entertaining issue to read. Also, last night in Nashville, Tennessee, there was an altercation between Jim Cornette, who has been a frequent guest on our show, and Ed Ferrara. And it was not a professional wrestling angle. So if you're going to call up and ask if it is, don't even bother. What happened was there actually had been talk during the week, because listen to Jim Cornette mention, like, what would happen if he ever saw Russo or Ferrara, Vince Russo or Ed Ferrara, and what he would do. He's made it vocal. It's actually been on this show a couple of times saying those very words.
Or if they were all in a boat together.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, Burt Prentice was the promoter of the show in Nashville, and Jim Cornette and Scott Hudson do the announcing for his USA Pro Wrestling. And Jerry Jarrett wanted his announcing crew to do a tryout, just kind of like a test announce to get ready for their pay-per-view on June the 19th. And Mike Tenay was on vacation, so they were using Jeremy Borash in the role of Mike Tenay, which is quite a stretch. And Don West, who's their, hard sell guy, and Ed Ferrara. So Ed Ferrara were going to be in the same room. So Burt Prentice, when he found out on Tuesday, called up Jim Cornette and just goes, Ed Ferrara is going to be at the show. Promise me you won't hit him. And he goes, I promise I won't hit him. So what happened was he figured, like, for the rest of the week, I think I'm probably not going to go. Because if he went, he's afraid he might hit him. So he went back and forth during the week.
And we should probably explain why that is, too.
Well, Jim Cornette thinks that Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara ruined wrestling. And he also thinks they undercut him when he was on the writing team for World Wrestling Federation. They had entirely different philosophies, 180 degrees different from Jim Cornette. I think that the right philosophy is probably somewhere in the middle. I mean,
well, I would say it leans much closer to Jim Cornette's philosophy, just from watching Ohio Valley.
Yeah, but they're at extremes, though. You have to in both cases.
Yes.
So anyway, yeah, and I would agree with you on that. Anyway, he showed up there. He did, basically because he wanted to see Jerry Lawler wrestle Dusty Rhodes, which was the main event on the show. Because you're in the you're a fan of the '80s. What the hell? It's 20 years too late, but it's that match anyway. So he got there. Ed Ferrara showed up a little bit later, walked in the dressing room, and Cornette started talking to him very quietly. And the more he talked to him, the louder he got, and the redder he got, and the madder he got. And
Jim Cornette has a legend.
Well, we've heard him on the show, and he started basically complaining about and most of this was about Ed Ferrara's portrayal of Jim Ross with a Bell's palsy, both on WWF television and even more the Oklahoma character on WCW television, making fun of him for the Bell's palsy. And Jim Cornette, obviously, and Jim Ross are good friends dating back 20 years. So he started talking about, you made fun of my friend's affliction, the affliction that nearly cost him his career. Did it do anything for ratings? Did it do anything for anyone's entertainment? No, you just did it because you were mean-spirited. And he got madder and madder and madder. And anyway, when he was done with the promo, he spit right in his eyeball. So got a little bit in his mouth as well. And it was very tense for about 30 seconds there, but nobody hit anybody, and nobody fought anybody, and that was actually the end of the story.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good thing Jim didn't have a baseball bat handy.
Yeah, I know. Well, the story with Terry Landell, with Mason. No, that thing got totally out of control. And police and running somebody over. Believe me, it could have gotten a lot worse. Jim Cornette has a legendary temper. I mean, he bashed Casey O'Connor's windshield in with a baseball bat when they got in an argument over. I don't even remember what the argument was over. But Jim was under a lot of stress when Smokey was going down, and I mean, he was bashing in his house, and boy. Anyway, and speaking of roid rage, even though that isn't it. Big week when it came to that. I mean, because of the baseball revelations and everything, and the death of Davey Boy Smith being attributed by the coroner due to prolonged use of steroids caused the heart attack, which pending the toxicology reports because they may have something else there as well. So anyway, I don't know. I think that that story is going to be tied together. I think that's pretty much a given. And speaking of that,
I think as far as like steroids in wrestling and actually steroids in society in general, I think this is like the beginning last week of something that's going to be quite huge for various reasons. Yeah, partially because I think that the usage of steroids among teenagers and athletes is going to go way up because pretty much, I mean, the thing about the steroids is that, people have been fed lip service for 30 years. The buck work in any sport that requires power, which is most of them, and speed, which is also most of them. And I mean, the baseball people will go in there and just go, well, steroids don't, help you, hit a baseball, connect the ball with the bat. And they probably don't. But when you connect, if it goes 10% farther, that's the difference between, a fly out and a home run. It does change the game, and everyone knows it changes the game. And it's almost funny because I don't know a whole lot about baseball or sports in general, but when I hear a baseball player trying to make excuses for, this doesn't help my performance, I just take it, I think to myself, why? You're dressed up in this outfit that nobody admits to taking it. That's the excuse unless they've retired. Yeah. Well, almost nobody's going to admit to taking it because they're afraid of the publicity. But I mean, the thing is what's coming out now is they're using that as the excuse, when someone goes, do you use steroids? And it's like, steroids don't help me hit farthest. That way you don't answer the question. Yeah. Or it's nobody's business or whatever. And, I mean, a lot of the arguments, it's a Pandora's box because there's no answer. There is no answer to this thing. It's going to get worse in every sport. And, we're gonna see the Olympics roll around. Well, yeah.
Yeah, well, but I mean, it's been like that in the Olympics probably since the early 70s.
Yeah.
But, you know, it gets worse each time. Speaking of which, immediately after this show, Cindy Olivari, who was a member of the 1984 U.S. Olympic team, and before the Olympics tested positive for SIDS, and it came out at the time that she, in fact, had mononucleosis. That was the cover story. She actually was suspended for steroids, but publicly it was said she was off the team for mononucleosis, which is kind of how things are. She's going to be interviewed by Ron Barrs, along with Barry Clothier, who was a high-level bodybuilder who took steroids from about the age of 20 to compete in bodybuilding. We're going to start the phone calls. We're going to start with Aaron in Hartford, Connecticut. Aaron, what's going on?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Doing really good.
All right, I just want to talk a little bit about the Hogan-Vince angle that's going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
I just saw that they announced that Survivor Series is going to be at Madison Square Garden.
Yes.
I was thinking that...
Isn't the Survivor Series in Nassau? Oh, Survivor Series in Madison Square Garden. Yeah, SummerSlam's at Nassau Coliseum.
Right. That's where I thought that I think it's possible now if they could take Hogan off of TV for a month or two that they could build more momentum, more interest by bringing him back to have that payoff match at the Garden.
Could or will?
They obviously could, but that's not what they're going to do.
Do you think they're going to do it right at SummerSlam?
It won't, unless one of them gets hurt real bad between now and then. Yeah.
Now, is this going to be the big Hogan farewell once and for all?
I seriously doubt it. Hogan's going to be there until they boot him out, and Vince is a mark for Pops.
I mean, the Hogan thing more than anything else, we've talked about it before, where a guy gets a push because he's got a certain look, and he goes through the airport, and people turn their head, and the airport thing and everything like that. But Hogan, more than anybody else, he's a huge guy. He's got that aura about him. Vince only sees him backstage, only sees him at the shows where he's in the building, and these people pop for 8 straight minutes, and that is all Vince can see. And he will be there. When Vince said he was going to milk Hogan for every penny until the day he died, I do not doubt that at all.
But, and the other thing also is that they signed him to a 2-year deal, and, I mean, they're not going to send him home and pay him. That's not how they work.
Which to me is ridiculous because I look at, okay, this year already, since he's come in, I think he probably paid for his deal with WrestleMania, and so when I think about that, send him home.
Yeah. Well,
if you keep him around, you're not really justifying his paycheck, which is what Vince always thinks he's doing. Instead, you're hurting your own business and costing yourself far more than if you sent this dude home and paid him his $50,000 a week or $100,000 a week or what the hell it is.
Now they're going to have to send her a publicity tour because isn't his book due out like in
October? So he'll probably be off TV a lot. Or actually, they'll probably keep him on TV during that period.
Push the hell out of him and
to push the book. Yeah, they have to keep him strong for the book because we've already seen what happens when you do something wrong while the book is out with the Kurt Angle book.
Don't turn him heel.
That's right. Yeah, he ain't going to turn heel then. That's for damn sure.
Guys, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, very welcome. Let's try to get one more before the commercial break. No, we're not going to. Bryan, real quick, WWE Confidential. What were your thoughts on last night's show?
Maybe we should talk about my thoughts when I get back, because I have a lot of them.
Okay, well then, I guess that we will. We're going to go ahead and do a break right now. You're listening to the Wrestling Observer Live on the Sports Byline USA Radio Network.
Time for more Wrestling Observer Live. Email the show now or anytime at WOL@WrestlingObserver.com. That's WOL@WrestlingObserver.com. Now, back to Dave Meltzer and Bryan Alvarez.
Hey, welcome back to the show. I'm Dave Meltzer, editor of Wrestling Observer Newsletter with Bryan Alvarez of Figure 4 Weekly. And if you want to get either of those publications, just go to www.WrestlingObserver.com, and there's information on how to subscribe to the Observer and Figure 4. If you read them, you will be up to date on all the wrestling news all over the world. A lot of good issues coming the last couple of weeks, and I think there's going to be a lot of talk this week about Tough Enough. Anything that, in particular you're planning on headlining with this week, Bryan?
I think Tough Enough.
Okay, I've got to write about Tough Enough as well, and whatever else happens. I'm going to do my 10-week, whatever it is, on the split, the 10-week overview of the split. I said I wasn't going to do anything big, and I've been wanting to every week, but I said I'm waiting for the 10 weeks, and Monday makes 10 weeks, and I got a lot to say about that. Also, Edge suffered a pretty bad shoulder injury in the cage match on Tuesday with Kurt Angle that aired Thursday night on SmackDown, and he may be out of action for a while. We won't know any more about it. He's going to the doctor a week from tomorrow to Dr. Jim Andrews to get the thing checked up to see if he's going to need surgery or not. But and that's one of the things, we always talk about long-term planning, and they need to plan long-term. The flip side of that is guys get hurt so much that, Edge is the push of Edge was one of the #1 priorities of this summer. They were trying to build around, and now that he may be gone the whole summer or most of the summer.
I think it's a risk you have to take, though.
Yeah.
I would much rather take that risk than do this. Well, Raw's tomorrow. Let's start working on the show now and figure out what we're going to do. And, book one day at a time. That never works. So
they did have a lot better shows this week, though. I thought SmackDown was a really good show. And Raw, I didn't think Raw, a lot of people loved Raw. I thought Raw had an excellent main event. The rest of the show to me was just, what Raw has usually been.
It was one of those sandwich shows where, like, the beginning and end were good, and then you had that middle that was just horrendous.
Yeah, but don't you love, I got to say this, Straightest. I mean, he went in there and threw a temper tantrum, and, if it was like anybody else throws a temper tantrum in wrestling, I mean, they do stuff like, they'll kind of like make them look bad on TV. Kevin Nash gets this gimmick where nobody on his team can lose now.
Yeah.
Because they're kicked out and nobody wants them kicked out. So anyway, that was, and don't think that lesson wasn't lost on everyone in the company.
Oh, yeah.
WWE Confidential last night. What were your thoughts?
I think first off, I have to say that I actually like Gene Okerlund in his role on this show. And the reason is there's some good things on this show and there's some things that really annoy me, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a moment. But with those things that annoy me, I think if anybody else were doing this show, like Michael or Jonathan Coachman, it would just grate on me and I wouldn't even be able to watch it. But Gene is like, he's like a living cartoon character. He's one of those guys from the 80s, like Hulk Hogan, where sometimes they can be funny without even trying. Like Hogan says brother, and everyone thinks that's funny. But, if he went out there and tried to say brother, it wouldn't be funny. And Cole always tries to laugh and be goofy and funny and hip, and it never works. But I think that Gene, in this show that they have here, is like the perfect host. So I just wanted to get that out of the way first. But overall in the show, I like the segments they do with, like, Before They Were Famous and stuff like that, because I actually watched the Before They Were Famous DVD, which is where the Spike thing came from, and it's a really interesting DVD, and, it's fun to watch that kind of stuff. But,
you know what, though? To me, okay.
Yeah.
Spike Dudley, they said his name was Matt Hyson. He grew up, in Connecticut. Bubba Ray's not his brother. Devon's obviously not his brother. We all know that. If they're admitting that on television, tomorrow night when they draw, why don't they just call him Matt Hyson? We already know anyway, so it's like, when Jim Ross just talks about his half-brother Bubba, it just kind of is a credibility killer because now...
Yeah, well, this whole show is a credibility killer, though.
Well, Confidential is a credibility killer in a different way because the show has that fake credibility while having no credibility.
Yeah, and that brings me to... I don't understand what the point of this show even is, because...
To draw ratings and nothing more.
Yeah, I understand that, but why not just totally lie? Why not just hotline show? Because when you go half-assed like this, anybody who really does know the entire story is just going to be annoyed, like we are.
And we will be every week.
Yeah, every single week. But anybody who doesn't know the real story, why not just make the most fantastic, wild, crazy story that you can? Why go half-assed?
Because I think that they're into manipulation while they do the story, and if you just go this wild, crazy...
The people that they're trying to manipulate know the story.
No. The people that are trying to manipulate don't know the story.
Then don't tell them the story at all.
But for ratings, the drug addiction, somebody died, Montreal, look at what Excess was drawing compared to what this show's going to draw.
I know, but if you look at the rating, I think that this show's rating proves that only really, really hard fans are watching this show, and I think it's going to show more this week when the rating drops. So, this is targeted to hardcore fans.
But, they're not going to tell... You can't expect them to tell the truth on sensitive subjects like the death of Baby Blue.
That's why I'm asking, why even do it halfway? I don't get it.
Because they think that it's a ratings getter, like I said.
I guess that's probably the thing, but I think in the end it will not be a ratings grabber. I think, like, last week it was curiosity for the show. In fact, for me it was curiosity last week, and for me it was curiosity this week. But next week, they're hyping up behind the scenes with Tough Enough 2, and to me it's like, I remember, maybe I'll watch it, but I really have no desire to at this point.
Well, the other thing also behind the scenes of Tough Enough, when you know you're not going to get the real story anyway, how much interest does anyone really have with Tough Enough other than, there were people interested, obviously, Thursday night did a good number with the finish and everything, but those characters, throughout that season did not draw ratings.
Yeah.
So
unless they were doing wacky stuff like the hot tub.
Well, the hot tub but that was the only show. It was the hot tub that drew a good number. Anyway, let's go to Alan in Deerfield Beach, Florida.
Hey, how's it going, man?
It's going pretty good. What's happening?
What's the update on Goldberg's contract negotiation with WWE?
There is no update in that they haven't talked at all.
They haven't talked at all?
Nope. Bill Goldberg's
has become the smartest man in wrestling.
Yeah, I think he's trying to stall out, figuring that the lower the ratings get, the better his deal's going to be. Bill Goldberg's reaction to them is the same as his reaction to us here on So when I heard what was going on, it was like, boy, I can relate to this one.
Right.
So.
And I wanted to ask you, you mentioned Jim Cornette's temper. Is there some long-standing heat between him and Heyman?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Friends?
Oh, no. They were friends about, when they were growing up, they're roughly the same age and roughly the same background. But I would say, I think it was over the New Jack thing when, New Jack was finishing up in Smokey and he had about 2 weeks to go.
Right.
And Cornette, basically arranged a deal with Heyman. It's like, I'm finishing him up because he was basically killing their territory.
Right.
And he says, you want those guys, and Heyman wanted them. And then went to New Jack and just goes, start here this Friday, as a surprise, which caused him a no-show like the last week or two of Cornette's shows. Right. And since then there have been about 20 other things, but that was what started it.
When they were working the angle in NWA, were they still close, or remember?
Oh yeah. They were very close then, because they were two guys that were battling the system because the system didn't want, for whatever reason, did not want that feud to get over. So they had, they were kind of on the same page there. Both being kind of. There wasn't any tension at that time. In the NWA days, no, none whatsoever, none.
But then all of a sudden something transpired.
The New Jack thing, I think, was it. And then, there were other things. Cornette didn't like ECW, didn't like how ECW was changing wrestling. And then, there were a lot of small things that happened.
They didn't like him from the start, and they were just kind of, tolerating each other.
No. They were, they were fine with each other until, the mid-90s.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, very welcome.
Thank you.
Let's go to Matt in Boston. Matt, what's happening?
Good day, everybody. Want to talk about Japan?
Uh-huh.
Oh, Ricky Choshu?
Yes.
Is Dojo Ricky going to be, run regularly or sort of like Usami's group? And
I think that's just a way, and we'll find out. I can't imagine him running too many shows because it's not going to, who's going to get, and it's not going to draw anybody. I think it's more of a way to have, a team, and to go into either 0-1 or All Japan probably, and, kind of be an invading group. And I'll bet you they'll do their invasion, okay, they won't beat all of his guys the first night in.
Yeah, well, that's just... Do you think in January there'll be any jumps? Like Sasaki, Yoshi, Azuka, and Nakanishi are all Chotu's guys. In January, there's contracts are,
yeah, I could see it. I think, you got to see how they do with All Japan, but I could see if, All Japan takes off more with Choshu, that certainly Sasaki's his total protege, and, and there are a lot of those guys are close with him. I could definitely see it, yeah.
That 1-year contract thing with all the deals coming up at the same time
is insane.
Weird to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. What it is? It's just tradition. That's how they've always done it. And, they're going to have to...
The year that they go up to?
What?
Is it the first of the year or the 31st?
Isn't it after the 4th, 1/4 show?
I think it's January 30th, 31st they run out.
I was going to say, if they were up January 1st and they have the biggest show of the year on the 4th...
Well, they don't. It's right after the 4th, yeah.
Yeah, so...
About Hashimoto and NWA TNA, is this, I thought it's supposed to be maybe in a battle royal if you can make it?
Brawl with Bagwell.
June 19th. I'm trying to think if they're even running June 19th.
I don't really follow their...
I don't have the Zero schedule memorized. I don't know. He might do it. I don't know what his thought process is. I'm sure that they want to have a business meeting with those guys, since those guys are going to, the Jarretts are going to be controlling all the NWA titles from this point forward, and they kind of have some business built around the NWA heavyweight title. So it wouldn't shock me for him to go there.
Have you heard about Inoki's?
He'll love it. He'll love it too, by the way.
Same way. About UFO, did you hear about they might maybe getting the G1 final special time slot?
What do you mean? Oh, you mean yeah? There's a good shot that's going to happen. That was it. TV Asahi's going to run the UFO show from the Tokyo Dome instead of the G1 finals. Yeah, I think there's a pretty good shot that's going to happen. It depends on what card they have. But if they have Ogawa against Peter Arts, that's going to be a bigger draw than anything than G1. So they'll go with that for sure.
Well, the thing about Inoki is why he started New Japan Pro Wrestling. It's his promotion.
Yes.
He owns it now. Majority. Why is he trying to put out UFO? Why is he in Pride too? What's his thing with it? I don't know.
He wants to control everything, and he wants to.
He's killing his own promotion by doing it.
Yes, he is, but I don't think that he. I think he sees the way. I think he sees it as elevating it and making it more real because they're all affiliated with each other. I mean, it's. That's just how. But Inoki's fought like that since the '70s. That's why he fought Ali and all those people. And it worked. It made him a larger-than-life star. It's just like with Hogan. They have the mentality that got them over, but 20 years later, things have changed, and they're still thinking like it was back then.
with that Sasaki Yasuda, who do you think won that? Sasaki's been built up pretty big.
God, I hope Sasaki wins. I'm sick of Yasuda. You know, what can I say? Anyway, we got to head to a break, okay?
Yep.
All right. You can call us at 1-866-OBSERVER. Actually, you can't because all lines are filled right now. But anyway, we will be back. You're listening to the Wrestling Observer Live on the Sports Byline USA Radio Network.
We're back with Wrestling Observer Live. Give us a call anywhere in the U.S. toll-free at 1-866-OBSERVER. That's 1-866-627-3783. Once again, here's Dave Meltzer and Bryan Alvarez.
Okay, welcome back to the show. I'm Dave Meltzer, editor of the Wrestling Observer newsletter with Bryan Alvarez of Figure 4 Weekly, and we're talking about whatever you guys want to talk about when it comes to pro wrestling. You can talk about mixed martial arts as well.
We have an email here.
Yes?
Our thoughts on the NWA TNA Gauntlet for the Gold match and Scott Hall, of all people, being in the NWA.
Funny you should say that, Bryan, because that is the actual next thing on my notes is Scott Hall and Buff Bagwell in NWA TNA. And there is something about this industry, and I know what it is, and it is that nobody ever learns. And that's all I'm going to say about Scott Hall, is that nobody ever learns.
And Buff Bagwell.
And Buff Bagwell.
You know, this is the way you do it from this point forward. Every time there's going to be a startup, the first startup that does not sign Buff Bagwell is the one that's going to make it big, because they will have learned some lessons.
Well, you know, hopefully somebody learned something. And
not that I don't think this one's going to make it, but
I think the odds are pretty strong against it making it, to be honest. Last night on Confidential, they did the segment on Davey Boy Smith, and I think a lot of people probably liked it. And when it was over, I knew that this was one of those things that Davey Boy Smith not whitewashed the fact that he had a problem with painkillers, but there are reasons. They tried to portray it as that the evil WCW that he fell on their trap door and all of a sudden suffered a back injury and got a painkiller problem, and the WWF of course did everything to help him, but he was just so far gone he couldn't turn it around. And the WWF did do everything to help him that they could. I won't deny that at all. He developed this problem in the WWF in the 80s, and he was in terrible shape when he came to WCW. And I really resented watching that thing, the trapdoor. He hurt his back bad on that trapdoor bump, but that, and that didn't help any of his problems, believe me. But those problems dated back long before that. And number two, again, toxicology reports as far as what was in his system at the time of his death have not come out. And he may very well, it would not shock anyone in this world. In fact, I think everyone in wrestling is expecting that when the toxicology reports come in, that he died of some sort of an overdose causing the heart attack. But the preliminary diagnosis and the only thing that we can go by today as a reason for his death is that it was from prolonged steroid use. That's what the coroner came up with this week.
Which was not mentioned in any way, which doesn't surprise me, but it wasn't. And
in that story, and exactly, and I think that, if you're going to talk about it, I mean, the bottom line, I thought that a near truth, but so fake that it really bothered me.
Yeah, I mean, the thing more than anything was, they showed the bump on the trap door, and they tried to portray, from 1978 or whatever year it was that he debuted until 1998, Davey Boy Smith was a natural athlete. He was in perfect physical condition, and all of a sudden he had this bump on the trap door and his life spiraled downhill. And that right there was like, oh my God.
Yeah, it was a total fraud.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm going to say about that until someone brings more of it up. We're going to go to Chris in Savannah, Georgia. Chris, what's going on?
Hey guys.
Hey.
You know what? It's really funny to me because when Jeff Jarrett lambasted me on the TNA subject, asking me, well, what does TNA stand for? Total nonstop action. Having Scott Hall and Jeff Jarrett in the same match, for God's sake, doesn't seem like total nonstop action to me, does it? To you?
No, not what I heard about Buff Bagwell last night, boy. He had a horrible match with Brian Christopher in Nashville,
okay.
And with them watching. But this is the Hail Mary promotion. All the odds are against them, and they're just sitting there praying that maybe someone's going to tune in to see Scott Hall. I mean, he's got name value. Maybe they'll tune in to see Buff. I don't know what they're thinking, and I guess we'll, as the weeks go on, we'll find out. If I will say this,
thinking they need guys for a battle royal.
Yeah. Now, if Scott Hall and Buff Bagwell are only in for the first show, and it's just kind of they're bringing them in to see thing, and they're not being built around, they may not be stupid on that account. But if they're counting on them to be players and regulars and things like that, then they're doomed.
But the thing is, they bring Buff Bagwell and Scott Hall in for the first show, and yet they stripped the title off of Dan Severn because he can't make the first show.
Well, they won a battle royal in the first show, and they don't care about titles. It's
Actually, they may care too much about titles if they're planning on,
if they care, if they
every show for the first 3 weeks, when that's something you could spread out over 3 months.
No, but I mean, if they really cared about titles, they would do a tournament or they would do something logical rather than throw them in a Royal Rumble where, when it comes out, whoever wins, no one's going to care anyway.
My thoughts exactly.
Yeah.
I gotta ask you, I know this business makes strange bedfellows, but what
That's
in
for
the
sure.
What in the world
Vince McMahon.
would I have put in that book that would have made Fuyuki and Onita bedfellows?
I don't know the whole thing with that book. I'm sure that there was some, they all worked together at various times, and he ended up the one deeply in debt. So I'm sure it's kind of like Jim Crockett and Dusty Rhodes at the end. Like Jim Crockett followed Dusty Rhodes right out of business, but years later, he ended up hating Dusty Rhodes because he kind of figured it out later. And I think Arai, was probably charmed by Onita and then by Fuyuki. And all of a sudden, now that he's about himself, which in fact he did, and, with $2.5 million in debt, he kind of put all this together and just go, these guys gave me a lot of bad advice.
I mean, there's been so many deaths.
Oh, it's sick. It's just absolutely sick.
Yeah, it is. And, the Davey Boy one, that caught me off guard. I could see it coming. But, Arai, that really hit me hard because I looked at this guy, on my tapes, and I was, and everything I heard about him, and I thought, this guy, this is, a rarity in this business. He's a guy who truly seems to care, and it just saddened me, to the point where he couldn't, end up paying Hayabusa's medical bills, and it was just a really, really, bad situation that he put himself in.
Well, he and Heyman went through the exact same thing.
Yeah.
But Heyman, I don't think Heyman was. I know Heyman was never close to suicide. That's for sure.
Right.
I think some people might have been close to wanting to kill him, but that's a different story.
I think that's pretty much a guarantee.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for your time.
Okay, thanks very much, Chris. We're going to go to Greg in Providence. Greg, what's going on?
Hey, guys. First things first, I just want to say great job last weekend on that interview with Bret Hart. I thought that was a great show, and I really hope you guys get him soon again.
Yeah, I hope we will, too. I've got a feeling when he gets that tape of Confidential...
Definitely.
He hasn't seen it yet, but I just had a feeling that when he does...
Was that really even talked about last week?
We talked about it a little bit, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But he hadn't seen the show, so, you can't really talk too much about what you haven't seen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the main reason I'm calling, obviously, is tough enough to... I can honestly say I've enjoyed watching this season more than I've enjoyed watching Raw and SmackDown the past few months. And I really looked forward to the ending, and I can say that I was just very disappointed to see that the final product was two female finalists being picked as the winners. And just as far as where Nidia has gotten since Tough Enough won, I think I've seen her for about 2 since that. And for that
may be all you ever see of her too.
I know. The push they gave Maven just was oh wow, I can't imagine what they're gonna do with this Jake or Kenny. Out of the two of them.
Well, Jake didn't have it. The only reason Jake was there for the finals was because they were just praying that the light would come on because he looked so good. Believe me, I want to say, because this actually, if you understand the situation, Jake had a giant advantage over everyone there, and it was his to blow, and he blew it big because he wasn't good enough, and that's why Jake didn't get picked. And I don't
know if that was so much him blowing it. He didn't capitalizing on his other strengths.
He didn't pick up wrestling.
Yeah.
He didn't understand wrestling. He didn't know why you do what you do when you do it. He couldn't, pick up the fluidity of the moves. Now, Kenny was the best athlete when it came to being a wrestler of the three. The deal was, and why they picked him was because the trainers were asked, which of these four people have the best shot at making an impact in wrestling, and their thought was that Jackie's Desire blew everyone else's away, and that Linda provided the most complete package because she could do a promo. She was a great athlete. She's a much better athlete than any of the women that they have. She's very pretty, She's got size, and they thought that she could be a major player with a little bit of training in the women's division, and that Jackie also was the most over to the audience and had the most, that type of, Kenny was a good technical wrestler, and they felt that if he went to Ohio Valley, there would be, 15 guys much better than him, and he would just be another guy lost in the shuffle. And that's the reasons why they picked who they picked.
Do you think, honestly, though, that these two girls are just going to be, are going to be pushed, or are they just going to be two Nidias?
They're going to be sent, and if they make it, they make it. After 9 weeks...
I don't think... Hold on, can I say one thing real quick? I don't think either one of those girls is going to be Nydia, because I had no problem with those choices they made this past Thursday night, but I had a problem when they chose Nydia. And it wasn't so much that at the time I thought that Taylor was a lot better than she was. I thought it really should have been the two guys.
But they couldn't because they screwed up on the...
Yeah, so they had to choose a woman, and they chose Nydia. And, just out of Ohio Valley... I've seen clips of Nydia, and, her interviews, they have not gotten any better from last year. In Ohio Valley, she's still, not only is she not working singles matches, but when she works tags and six-man,
they hide her.
They hide her, yeah. She's on the apron the entire time, maybe tagging into the finish. And, I don't see either of these girls that they chose being another Nydia. No way.
Yeah, I think they're both going to be a lot more aggressive, and especially, Linda Miles. One of the things that they like to recruit is intelligent people who are great athletes. And, Linda Miles played Division I basketball. She was a rebounder. She was a tough girl. And, she was a good student at Rutgers, which is not an easy college. And that impresses them a lot more than, they don't want... I tell you, where Taylor, hurt herself was... You know how Taylor lost that thing anyway. Was, the first night she drank, they want to send a girl like that on the road.
Exactly.
And that's one of the things you're looking for. Jake, believe me, Jake would have been picked if Jake could wrestle, because Jake physically had more going for him than everybody else.
Yeah. I hope you guys are right as far as being better than Nydia, because I kind of see where you're coming from on that.
Yeah.
And just one last thing. I don't know. Did you guys see that fight last night?
I sure did. Brian didn't see the fight.
Dave saw it.
The doctor said he could keep going, but I don't understand how that's not dangerous. That thing was just getting bigger and bigger.
That was the scariest thing. It was like he was growing a second at the top of his eye.
And the doctor said you can keep. What is that really safe? Like as far as injuries, like as far as
you'd have to talk to a doctor. Something that fills up with blood, and
What if it popped?
Oh, exactly. That's what I could think about. Is if he takes a shot to the forehead.
And like in a boxing match, you ain't gonna take a shot to something that big.
Oh, I'd be aiming for that thing.
Yeah, I couldn't. That was pretty weird. But when I saw the thing, they had to stop that fight thing because I didn't want to see it anymore. Anyway, we got to head to a break right now. Thanks very much, Greg. We'll be back with more. You're listening to Wrestling Observer live on the Sports Byline USA Radio Network.
Time for more Wrestling Observer Live. Email the show anytime at WOL@WrestlingObserver.com. That's WOL@WrestlingObserver.com. Now, back to Dave Meltzer and Bryan Alvarez.
Okay, welcome back to the show. I'm Dave Meltzer, editor of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, with Bryan Alvarez of Figure 4 Weekly, and we're here for 2 hours every Sunday night here on the Sports Byline Radio Network, Rex Broadcasting as well. And
I got to mention something else about that confidential show last night.
Yes.
The Spike Dudley segment at the end of it, he's talking about, I was once interviewed by a masked man. And he told me, if you ever want to make it in this business, you're going to have to take crazy bumps and kill yourself every night.
No, he said you're going to have to learn really spectacular moves. He didn't say crazy bumps and kill yourself.
You didn't say that?
No, you have to learn to do really spectacular moves. And Spike said, see, I proved you wrong. Spike did crazy bumps and almost killed himself.
Yes.
To get over. That was the difference.
Yes.
I'm not sure which is better.
Which is worse.
I know. But anyway, let's go to John in Chicago. John, what's happening?
Hey, hey guys. I want to, first of all, do you think, as far as the tough enough, do you think Jake is going to come in through the back door like Chris did, or
he'd have to, if he went on the independent, look, everyone knows who he is. If he went on the independents and wanted to do this, and went independent, there's plenty of people who would book him. And if he got to where he was a good worker, believe me, they would sign him because he's got the look and he's got the notoriety.
Maybe they'll sign him anyway in about 6 months.
The plan right now, I was told, was they were strongly recommended against it.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, but you're not saying that Jake is like he has no future in this business.
No, if he makes a future for himself and is good, because of his look, he has a future in this business. But today, Jake doesn't appear to have a future in this business in the WSIs.
I see. Okay.
Okay.
Kurt Angle, real quick. Did you see the match on SmackDown there?
Yes.
I was, that was the match there, and I know we've always heard and said Kurt Angle is going to be one of the great ones, but he already is. Totally surprised with that match because here he is. He's doing comedy with the hair, but he's still doing a serious match. He hits so many notes. Do you think that we're going to talk about him like a Ric Flair or a Bret Hart?
I already do.
Yeah, I think he's pretty close to that level right now. I just don't know if he's going to last as long as they did because the style is so much more physically taxing. Mm-hmm. And plus, he has a lot of injuries walking in from amateur wrestling, since he was very young. We've got to head to a break, John, okay? Okay, we'll be back with our second hour right after this. You're listening to the Wrestling Observer Live on the Sports Byline USA Radio Network.